Hey everybody, today I'm going to be talking about the internal monologue I struggled with while I was in my porn addiction and how that whole process went out and how I dealt with it. Stay tuned. So, what exactly is the internal monologue? Well, that's usually the voice that you hear inside of your mind when you're having thoughts. But what I discovered was that during my porn addiction, my internal monologue had been sexualized. In other words, even when I wasn't watching porn, the sexualization of my thoughts carried along with me. So some of the ideas about what sexuality were and how it sort of like intensified my interest in sex kind of followed through in my mind, even while I was doing like work related things or I was just being hanging out in the world. As I got exposed to other people who I found sexually interesting, I wouldn't say to myself, "Oh, she's attractive." I would, go in the worst possible dirty talk you could possibly imagine. So, oh man, look at the rack on her. I'd like to. You kind of get the idea. So, the thing to consider here is that it's natural to have, say, like a sexual impulse or desire. That is not the problem. What is the problem is that the programming I had received, and that's what it is, programming, the programming that I had received from pornography that told me how to amplify the sexual thoughts, how to actually experience those emotions. It takes it and amplifies the experience so much that I wanted to continue that experience. And that's what I was doing every single time I was out in the real world, or even, say, having relations with my wife. My internal mind was pornifying that experience. I couldn't just have normal sexuality. I wanted to have that pornified sexuality. Now, of course, I'm telling you this, but as a conceptual idea, but the actual thought process was automatic. I wasn't even thinking about it, was not even thinking about it. I didn't really reflect on this too much while I was early in recovery, but thanks to, in part, to journaling and just some really deep thinking, I can now contemplate that monologue that I have, the experience of elevating the sexual intensity through the conversation of what I call pornified talk, is gone. I don't really think in those terms anymore. But there was a time when I was early in recovery where certainly the conversations were still going on. What I had to do is I had to treat that as an intrusive thought. An intrusive thought is a way in psychology of just being able to identify something, a thought that enters your mind, that you really don't want that thought anymore. It's like it just kind of sticks into your craw and you can't get it out. And unfortunately, intrusive thoughts when it comes to porn addiction can actually be quite triggering. So, when I'm trying to stay sober early on, having a really intense sexual thought is the sort of thing that might lead me to act out. So, what I do is I use mindfulness techniques in order to kind of early on fight what's going on. So as a habit, I developed this, intense sexual thought that happened to accompany my cravings or even create the cravings. So in order to counteract that, I usually say to myself, oh, there I go again. In other words, I acknowledge the fact that I'm doing it. I don't get mad at myself. That's not the purpose here. The point is to confront it with your mind. Like, oh, you know what? I really am having that thought. And now you're putting yourself into the third person. Your mind's eye is examining the way that your mind is actually operating. And when you can do that on a regular basis, and it gets tedious after a while, but when you can do that on a regular basis, oh, I'm having that thought again. I'm having that thought again. What happens is that it starts to conceptualize that this is a repeated pattern, and then by the process of constantly doing this and repeating this over and over again, your mind starts to decrease in the amounts. Like it can almost anticipate that the reflex is going to happen, so it stops doing that reflexive action. And it's crazy. It's repetitive. It's boring sometimes, but if you keep doing that over and over again, the thoughts start to slide away. And you know, the important part about all of this is that you don't get mad at yourself for doing it, because you have to treat it just like you treat your porn habit. It's just a habitual cycle that you've built into your psyche, and it's going to take a little while to make it stop. And that's okay, right? We all know that in terms of our own recovery, it just takes time to get through things at times. So you take your time, you pace yourself out. I just want you to know that there's other cognitive behavior therapy techniques that'll actually work as well. I'm just providing you one of them. But when it comes to intrusive thoughts, actively engaging them is the way to go. Mindfulness techniques do work over time. My name is Road to Recovery. I hope you find this information useful. I don't make any money on this channel. This is all part of my 12th step, giving back to the addict who still suffers. If you like what I do here, please like, share, and subscribe. And thank you. Please stay on that road to recovery.